Coming up on July 19th in the MGM Grand Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, Sebastian Fundora and Tim Tszyu will be having their highly anticipated rematch for the unified junior middleweight championship of the world. Currently, Sebastian Fundora has a record of 22 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw, with 14 of those wins coming by way of knockout, and his single loss also coming by way of knockout. He is 6'5.5" with a reach of 80 inches. On the other hand, we have Tim Tszyu, with a record of 25 wins, 2 losses, and 0 draws. He is 5'8.5", and he has a 70.5" reach. Now, as we all know, Fundora is much taller and has a much longer reach than Tim Tszyu. A roughly 10-inch reach advantage and also a 9-inch height advantage is at play. And we could see this from, obviously, their first outing. Now, this rematch is actually one of the most intriguing rematches I have seen in the last 5 or so years. You could correct me if I'm wrong. However, this rematch is one that could go many ways. In the first fight between Fundora and Tszyu, Tszyu was a heavy favorite, and he had gotten Fundora as an opponent with around a week's notice, originally supposed to face Keith Thurman. Now, what made the fight even more intriguing was that both fighters received very bad injuries mid-fight that caused a great amount of blood to flow out of both fighters. Out of the two fighters, however, Tszyu had it much worse. Not only was he the shorter fighter, he was cut right on the top of his head, in which the blood would hinder his vision. And against a taller fighter, he was left at a great disadvantage. Now, that is not to say Fundora had a broken nose in the fight. However, it was not affecting him. The broken nose may have hurt, but it was not affecting him visually. And he did not have that constant flow of blindness throughout the fight. Furthering from this, Tszyu is coming off of a win over Joseph Spencer, a good regional level fighter, regional level fighter. But before that, Tszyu had a very bad loss against Bakram Murtazaliev, where he lost by TKO in the 3rd round, and where he was knocked down 3 times in round 2 and once in round 3, and eventually KO'd. And in the Murtazaliev fight, one could tell that Tszyu had not fully recovered from the first Fundora fight. If you rewatch the Murtazaliev fight, or if you've watched it, you see that there are points where Murtazaliev hits Tszyu on the forehead, and Tszyu puts his glove on his forehead as if he believes he's bleeding. And such an experience as having a wide cut that hinders one's vision in a fight for approximately 10 rounds is not an experience that many boxers would like to go through. And in some ways, it may be worse than being knocked out, dependent on your mentality in the sport. However, I believe that Tszyu is definitely damaged permanently in the sport. However, I do not believe that his confidence is going to wane. Tim Tszyu is one of those fighters who is a warrior, and he is someone that will continually fight head-on and whatever opponent he faces, he will have full confidence in beating. And with that in mind, the same probably could be said about Fundora. However, Fundora, I believe, got a little bit lucky in the first fight against Tszyu. He caused a cut through his elbow and not through a punch. And so the whole reason which hindered Tszyu in the first place was a foul, accidental foul by Fundora. And I believe that in the first fight, if Tszyu had not had that cut, that he may have beaten Fundora pretty easily. By the end of the second round, Tszyu had already landed a few very big shots to Fundora's head and had found his range. And based on the minimal performance of Tszyu in the first fight, I believe that coming into this fight, Tszyu will have an exuberant amount of confidence. And I believe Tszyu believes wholeheartedly that he can destroy Sebastian Fundora. But let's analyze Fundora for a moment. Fundora, in his last fight, beat Chordale Booker by a 4th round TKO victory. Now, Booker is not in any way, shape, or form a world-level operator. He is a 34-year-old southpaw who, when moving up to a European-level status, has always won by a very close decision, such as his fight with Sean Owens, or lost very badly in his one fight against Austin Williams, where he lost by KO in the first round. Booker is not particularly a great fighter. He's a good fighter, but not a great fighter. He's someone that could be a return opponent after a loss. And Fundora defending a unified championship against an opponent like that was merely so that Fundora would look good in the ring. Fundora has fought much better opposition besides Booker before even the Tszyu fight, and Fundora already has a KO loss to Brian Mendoza. Mendoza, an individual Tszyu beat handedly in the ring. Now, fighter A does not beat fighter B, and then that fighter, there's no ABC fighter beating in boxing, obviously. One fighter could beat another fighter and then lose to a fighter that person beats. But I do not really believe Fundora has improved that much. Fundora is using his jab more, and he is learning to use his height and reach much better in the ring, but not that much better. And Fundora may have the confidence, yes, to beat Tszyu, but I don't really see Fundora being able to break down Tszyu just like he did in the last fight. And personally, Tszyu knows he has something to prove. And the motivation not only to get his WBO belt back, but to also get the WBC belt in accordance with the notion that he needs to redeem himself, Tim Tszyu. I believe that Tim Tszyu will rise to the occasion in this rematch and beat Sebastian Fundora by a late round stoppage. This is Zachary Cloutier at Ringside.